What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of What If Countries Formed an Empire. And in this episode, we're going to see Brazil form an empire. Today's video, we will be doing it with my co-star.
Spanish Empire mapping.
So in this episode, Brazil's military will be buffed, but first thing we see is they're going to invade Uruguay, and they're also going to be using modern military tactics to invade them, using spider webs, getting real close to their capital, and they capture the capital city, and then they just sort of capitulate all these little areas that they captured with their modern military tactics, causing Uruguay to surrender. Here we see Brazil declare war on Sierra Leone and Liberia.
So in this war scenario, we will be seeing them make a naval landing in Sierra Leone to start, and then they decide to make one in Liberia, and they are very surprised that the Americans do not make a major push to stop it, but they keep pushing. So if the Americans do want to interfere, they will not be able to. And after Sierra Leone and Liberia get split from their coast and from each other, they are quickly able to be spidered. Like they use the spider method in Sierra Leone. And I think their capital is already taken. And they just decide to do the spider method like they did to Sierra Leone. And they quickly capitulate the nation. So the Brazilians decide to fully annex Sierra Leone and Liberia. But the international community will frown upon this, but they will not do anything yet.
Here we see Brazil declaring war on Suriname and Guyana. Brazil's going to make a push from the southern coast, not southern coast, but the southern lands of these countries. And they're also going to make a push up here in Guyana and capture the coast. They're going to make a naval landing over here using ports from over here really fast, and they're just going to spearhead down towards their land over here, and they're going to spearhead up through here, ignoring this border, because basically invading French and British. Yeah. But here we go. They're going to invade through here, spiking up their border, cutting them both off from each other, capitulating that whole area, cutting Guyana into two, capitulating this part, taking their coast up here, and they're going to surrender like so. And let's see this peace treaty. So next, well, they fully annexed this area, but next event is Paraguay declares war on Brazil, just as a retaliation, expecting help, but they're not going to get that, and they're just going to make small pushes along Brazil, and they're on their border, not really doing much because terrain and people living here. So they're just going to unify their front line like so, capitulating this whole area, and Brazil's going to be like, what did you just do? Oh, no, you didn't. Here we see Brazilian troops coming down, crashing down, just mad and extreme nationalism from these Brazilian troops because of how many lives they lost in the Paraguayan invasion and how fast they invaded into their territory. So they're going to move really fast using modern military tactics to capitulate them really fast and committing multiple war crimes all across Paraguay. Absolutely just destroying infrastructure over here. And they're going to surrender to Brazil as soon as possible to try to take less damage than they are. This is going to be the peace treaty, and they're going to puppet Paraguay, and they're going to annex the rest of this land. And they have a pretty big border with the country they hate most, Argentina, and they're going to be profiting a lot from trade over here. So, yeah, they probably ain't going to be doing much. They're probably just going to be building up for a few years, maybe tensions with Argentina. And yeah, that's just going to be it for what we're going to see, and they're going to go in sort of like a time lapse. Here we see Angola get thrown into another civil war, but this time Brazil's going to be involved. So the current government of Angola is sort of just going to win a little bit at the start, and they're going to be pushed back a little bit. The rebellion's goal is just to throw off the coast, and yeah, they've been in civil wars a lot actually. During the Cold War, big civil war since 2000, no, since 1975 to 2022, they were in a civil war. So, yeah, 2000, yeah, 2002, not 2022. But Brazil is going to get involved, and they're going to make naval landings here. They're going to say they're liberating the Angolans from the original government and the future government that they're going to set up as a way to sort of get the international community off their backs. And they're going to sort of work with the rebellion to an extent. I mean, they're not going to help them, but at this point they signed peace with them. So they're just going to aid them a little bit. They don't really want to, but they signed peace just now. And Brazil is also going to be sending in tons of troops, mainly for a goal of just setting up a puppet government in the future. But here we see Brazil taking this half, and then the new government is going to take the other half. So let's see this peace treaty. This is the peace treaty. Here we see southern Angola get puppeted, and Brazil's going to take little chunks of their coast and then ally the the new government that they were fighting. Now, they're allying them, so if Brazil gets into a war, they're going to join them. If they get into a war, Brazil has to join. But here we actually see a new alliance being formed, and it's going to be against Brazil. Now, founding member, is going to be Argentina. Here we see Venezuela join, and yeah, they're just gonna join. This ain't really a fair alliance, but let's see some new members join. Here we see these countries joining, and Mozambique's going to join. Here we see Nigeria joining Brazil's alliance, and should we see these alliances go to war? Yes or no?
Yes.
Here we see the alliance blitzing into Brazil and
Okay.
West
I
Africa.
a
First
little
thing we
bit.
see is all of West Africa sort of capitulating on over to Brazil's West African claims. And by the way, Keeg, they can hear you. And they're
A
going to
shared
push.
signal.
They're going to push into Brazil a bit more. And here we actually see Brazil make a push back into their lands, but they're really not going to be doing much until Nigeria figures out what they're doing. I'm just gonna turn their puppet state red for the simplicity. But here we actually see them pushing back a lot, and then here we see Nigeria pushing with a lot of their troops from here in Mozambique and Angola, not pushing with them, but you know what I mean. And they're just going to be pushing over here, liberating Brazil's area. Brazil can't help out over here, so it's sort of here. There we go. It's Nigerian it's occupied by Nigeria. Brazil has no control over it, basically. But here we see them pushing. They're going to push along here and capitulate that area. They're going to surrender here. This is the Ivory Coast. The Ivory Coast is going to surrender to Nigeria. Brazil's going to reestablish their colony. And Nigeria is just going to send troops over to Brazil now. And here we actually see them do some more pushing. But here we see Brazil and Nigerian forces push into this area with one major goal into making this little area get occupied real fast, splitting it off from Argentina to sort of gain some leverage in the war front, with Argentina having to focus on defending from that. And Argentina's not really going to be able to do anything about this. They're going to spearhead over here just to get to their lands over here. And here we see the spearhead going through here, causing this area and this area to capitulate back to the Brazilians. Well, this just capitulated. But they're going to push over here using many modern military tactics to sort of go behind the front lines to make that whole area just lose supplies slowly. And they're going to go for a Lincoln strategy with sort of landing on the coast to sort of make the coastal parts of eastern Argentina sort of fail to give Argentina less supply to their front lines, and they're going to also make naval landings over here with another goal just to cut off supplies, and it's going to work very well for the Brazilians with them having multiple spearheads across these fronts, and that whole area is going to be capitulated due to lack of supplies. And also, since they were so distracted, they're going to make pushes over here, not really being able to do anything since the terrain in this area sucks, but Venezuela is going to be doing lots of pushing. But we will see Nigerian troops land into Venezuela. Here we see Nigerian troops land into Venezuela like so, and they're also going to land... Whoa, that's not Venezuelan. Hold up, let me fix this, guys. Alright, there we go. And Nigeria is also going to be pushing down over here into Venezuela. And they're going to be pushing here. So, liberating all of this Brazilian land. Brazil is going to make a push, spearhead behind their front line. And they're going to lose all this land, resetting their supply chains. And then this is back in Brazilian hands, so they can make a push into here, liberating all of this area and this area. So they're just going to be pushed over here, capitulating that area, and this is going to cause... what should it cause? This is going to cause Venezuela to leave the war. So Venezuela is going to surrender, and they're going to have less of a punishment in the peace treaty. This area over here is going to be really hard to take back, so we actually might see Peru make some gains. But, Nigeria is going to use Mozambique as sort of a landing spot to go all the way across the Pacific. Actually, no, they're just going to go around South America. Actually, Panama Canal. Let's go. Easy. Never mind. So, they're going to make some naval landings across Peru, and this is going to really help them speed along supply chains, destroying them off the coast. Less trade's going to happen for them, making it really easy for them to push. But they would be using sort of guerrilla warfare a little bit, but on Brazilian turf, so I don't know how that would work, but they would be using the rainforest to their advantage, even though Brazilian troops should know this area. But Peru's probably more used to rainforests because Brazil's population, I'm pretty sure it's just all over here. But here we actually see just the whole front they had being pushed all the way back, and Peru is going to leave this war and surrender to Brazil, and all we see that's left is Argentina, and they're going to call for a peace treaty. So let's see this peace treaty. Here we see the peace treaty of what happened in this major war, and here we see Brazil gain some land in Peru, gain some land in Uruguay, and not Uruguay, they gain some land in Argentina, they expand their puppet state, they gained all of this area in Western Africa, making their claim in Western Africa giant. And then Nigeria also gets control over the Ivory Coast. Angola gets some of their land, and Brazil's puppet gets smaller as sort of like a trade for them being in the alliance and peace treaty and helping out in the war. And Mozambique just gets war reps. Yeah. And that's going to be it for the peace treaty. They're also connected to the Pacific Ocean. But that's it for the peace treaty. Goodbye, everyone.